You ever see a car so wild, so low, so unapologetically badass that it looks like it just rolled out of a comic book? That's a Rauh-Welt Begriff Porsche. It's not just a car, it's an attitude. And behind every one of those wide-bodied, street-scraping beasts is one man, a set of tools, and absolutely no rules. Welcome to the world of RWB, short for Rauh-Welt Begriff, which roughly translates to Rough World Concept in German. But don't let the fancy name fool you, this isn't some sterile white-glove tuning house. This is raw, gritty, garage-built art, and at the center of this movement is Akira Nakai, a cigarette-in-mouth genius from Japan who's been called one of the most influential tuners in car culture in the last 20 years. Before the world knew Akira Nakai as the mad genius behind RWB, he was just a young rebel in 1990s Japan. A guy in his early 20s with a cigarette between his lips, grease under his fingernails, and gasoline basically flowing through his veins. If you're imagining a quiet, disciplined tuning apprentice sweeping the shop floor somewhere, forget it. Nakai's roots were loud, raw, and dripping in JDM attitude. He started and was the heartbeat of the Rough World Car Club, a gang of misfits that could only be described affectionately as the baddest car enthusiasts on the planet. This wasn't some polished car meet with Instagram influencers and ring lights. This was beer cans, tire smoke, and a trunk full of wrenches. Rough World was about drifting, late-night mountain runs, and doing things their way, often sideways and preferably on the edge of a cliff. Their cars of choice were AE86s, lightweight rear-wheel drive icons that you could throw into a corner like you were living in an Initial D episode. They tore up the winding mountain roads around Suzuka Circuit like it was their own personal playground. There were no sponsors, no trophies, just thrill, risk, and the bond between driver and machine. And while the cops weren't fans, the underground car magazines were. Rough World started getting attention in print, showing up in grainy pages that smelled like engine oil and rebellion. The aesthetic was all there. Smoke, style, stance, and Nakai? Well, he wasn't just in the frame, he was the frame. The charisma, the edge, the vision. Even then, people knew this guy was different. What started as late-night chaos in the hills was quietly becoming a philosophy. Not one born in boardrooms or dyno charts, but in motion, noise, and soul. Now, running a drift crew like Rough World wasn't just about burning rubber, it burned through cash too. Building cars, throwing underground events, paying for whatever little facility they had. Let's just say the yen didn't stretch as far when you were also trying to blow tires off every weekend. And back then, sponsorship deals didn't exactly come knocking on the doors of kids racing up mountain roads and beat up AE86s. So, how did Nakai keep it all afloat? Bodywork. And no, not that kind of bodywork. Nakai got to work with metal and fiberglass. He started doing car body modifications, fixing up panels, stretching fenders, and learning piece by piece how to shape the soul of a car with his hands. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And more importantly, it was fuel, not just for his wallet, but for the dream. Every yen he earned went straight into Rough World, into tires, tools, and time on the togue. This was about passion over profit. It was never about building a business, it was about keeping the movement alive. In the process, Nakai wasn't just making ends meet, he was learning a craft that would later change the look of Porsches forever. He didn't know it yet, but those hours spent banging out body panels were quietly writing the blueprint for what would become RWB. Every legend has an origin story. For Akira Nakai, it wasn't a showroom fresh 911 that kickstarted RWB, it was a wreck. A tired, battered, borderline hopeless 1985 Porsche 930 Turbo. This thing was rough, and I don't mean Rough World cool rough, more like abandoned project car rotting under a tarp rough. The kind most people would have written off as a loss, but not Nakai. Where others saw rust, he saw potential. Where most people would calculate repair bills, Nakai calculated transformation. He didn't flinch at the cracked bodywork or the tired flat six. He saw the shape, the bones, the soul. And he made the owner a deal that, let's be honest, was probably just shy of robbery. A few bills exchanged hands, probably the kind of pennies on the dollar deal that makes purists cry into their logbooks, and the Porsche was his. What happened next wasn't restoration, it was a rebirth. Nakai went to work stripping every ounce of dead weight off the car. The rear seats were gone, sound insulation was gone, and any part of that car that didn't scream "race me" had left the building. He got deep into the engine bay, reviving the flat 6 turbo and massaging it until it spat out about 360 horsepower. No easy feat considering the thing had been collecting dust. Then came the suspension, fully race spec. The brakes, massive, wheels wider than your dreams, and then came the cuts. That legendary borderline sacrilegious fender slicing that would go on to define the RWB silhouette. And finally, a full custom wide body kit slapped onto that formerly sober Stuttgart frame. The result looked like the car had been possessed, more rage than refinement. If the stock 911 was a well-tailored German suit, Nakai's version was a leather jacket dipped in nitrous and espresso, a cocaine-snorting, steroid-injected Porsche race car for the streets, and right across the windshield, a massive banner, Rauh-Welt. Originally, Nakai had named it Rough World, an homage to its roots. But somewhere along the way, likely during his time in Belgium over a few too many glasses of his favorite lager, the name shifted to its German translation. Rauh-Welt felt right. A nod to Porsche's origins, and Begriff, that means understanding. So yeah, Rauh-Welt Begriff, Rough World Understanding. Sounds cryptic. Feels perfect. Oh, and the car's name? Stella Artois. Yes, after the beer, because why not? This wasn't just a build, it was the first sermon in what would become a full-blown gospel. Nakai didn't just modify a car, he created a new language in car culture, and the world was about to start listening. You can't keep something this wild a secret forever. Eventually, the world caught wind of Nakai's Frankenstein Porsche builds, and once it did, there was no turning back. His work started showing up in underground car magazines, but it was features in global outlets like Speed Hunters that really lit the fuse. Photos of these slammed, wide-bodied monsters with Japanese license plates and attitude dripping off every panel spread like wildfire, and the audience perfectly split. Half the car world was clutching their pearls and screaming sacrilege, while the other half was emptying savings accounts and emailing Nakai like he was a tuning messiah. The man didn't just build Porsches, he built chaos, and as it turns out, chaos sells. By 2011, the RWB wave crashed into the States, and the first guys to ride it were, predictably, some really crazy Americans. Enter Mark Arsenal, the founder of Fat Lace, a lifestyle brand and tuning shop out of California. Mark didn't just admire Nakai's work, he got on a plane to Japan, tracked him down, and asked for an RWB build like it was a sacred ritual. Then there was Brian Scott, another Porsche head with big dreams and an even bigger engine. Between Mark, Brian, and a trusty RWB rep handling logistics, Nakai was soon on US soil, tools in hand and vision in mind, and that's when it got really wild. First up, Panda 1, Mark's car. Based on a 964 chassis with a completely built 3.6-liter turbo engine, this thing didn't whisper performance, it screamed it through a green roll cage and a hydraulic suspension lift system. Those gleaming rotiform wheels were the cherry on top of an already aggressive green monster wearing that signature RWB body like armor. Panda 1 wasn't just a build, it was a declaration. Then came Hoonigan, Brian Scott's ride. Another 964 turbo, but with a totally different vibe. Glossy flat white on the outside, fire red race interior on the inside, and a wing so massive it probably affected local weather patterns. Power? A whole lot. The exact number? Doesn't matter. What mattered was presence, and the name Hoonigan was a nod to the company Brian co-founded with none other than Ken Block, rest in peace. That alone gave the car street cred before it even turned a wheel. When these builds dropped, the car community didn't just react, it imploded. You had hardcore purists grabbing pitchforks and screaming, "You can't do that to a 911." Meanwhile, the rest of us were Googling how to finance a shell and fly Nakai to our driveway. From there, things kinda snowballed fast. According to Mark Arsenal, now part of the RWB Inner Circle, there were over 400 RWB cars worldwide by 2023. By now, that number's likely crossed 500. That's more than double the number of Ferrari F40s ever made. Think about that for a second. a one-man operation in Japan customizing cars with cigarette ash and soul, outproduced one of the most iconic supercars ever built. RWB had officially gone from underground legend to full-blown cult, and the gospel was still spreading. So, you want an RWB Porsche. First off, bless your heart and your bank account, because step one is finding the right donor car, and trust me, that alone is no small task. You're not grabbing a beater off Craigslist, you're looking at clean 911s, often air-cooled, sometimes water-cooled, and always expensive. Once you've got the car, next is the hardest part. You've got to be emotionally okay with it getting chopped up like a sushi roll at midnight. Because Nakai doesn't finesse panels, he slices. Fender cuts are made by hand with an air saw in your garage while you stand there trying not to cry. The actual process of landing an RWB build starts with a message to RWB itself. Now if things go right, you'll get a meeting, or more like a vibe check, with Nakai. He doesn't do blueprints. What he's looking for is connection. Your car, your vision, his instincts. That's the deal. Once he gives you the nod, it's time to prep. The body panels and kit need to be ready, the car needs to be painted, and then Nakai shows up, usually with a small bag, a Coke in one hand, and a cigarette dangling from his mouth, because he doesn't talk much, he just gets to work. And in about 48 hours, he transforms your car into an RWB masterpiece. No measuring tapes, no digital tools, he uses his eyes to measure and his hands to sculpt. It's like watching an old samurai rebuild a katana from scratch if the katana was wide, German, and turbocharged. This means one thing. Every wide-body Porsche you see wearing that Rauh-Welt banner across the windshield had Nakai-san stand in front of it with an air saw and a soda and made it into something new. Something personal, something alive. Thanks for watching. If you felt this, hit that like button, drop a comment, and maybe, just maybe, start dreaming about your own RWB. We'll see you next time.